Good evening. I hope you guys are having a great night on a Monday night. We appreciate you coming out to kind of listen to us. We're going to kind of babble for a little bit in terms of trying to get a few more people on the conversation on the call. As you guys all know, the rules of the trade are down below. Try and use the Q&A for us, please, instead of the chat function. We're more than happy to answer your questions. We have plenty of time. This is really designed to be kind of a conversation. So you're going to hear Toby's opinions and Peter's opinions, and we're all friends. And so anything you want to ask us, we're more than happy to ask. If we don't know the answer, we'll kind of make it up. I'm kidding. We'll try and do the best we can in terms of the big picture. We're all relatively new to the EMV. Toby's probably got the most experience with regards to the RayOne platform in terms of the three of us. So if we kind of want to look at it in that big picture, he's been implanting the lens probably longer than Peter and myself. We're newer to the design in terms of the EMV, and really started for me using it when the EMV became available in North Carolina. I think that I would like to take a second, introduce everybody. Primarily, Toby's from Florida. He's been around. I learned tonight that he was a general surgeon at one point. I think that's awesome. We know why he's rugged. He's also an engineer. So if we want to go to the engineering side, it's always up to Toby. So welcome, Toby. You have any other comments? Like what, are you still a Florida fan, or who are you rooting for these days? Wake Forest, or where'd you go?
Oh, lately I've been rooting for Wake Forest because my daughter's there, and TCU where my son's at. So having a little bit of fun empty nesting now. But yeah, I'm down in Southwest Florida. Been using the platform now for probably about 4 or 5 years. So really have enjoyed that. We'll talk about that later. And just adding this new optic to it has really been wonderful.
And do you want to tell us a little bit about your practice while we're here?
So my practice in Southwest Florida started off as a one office, one surgery center, and now we're running about 6 offices, 2 surgery centers, and it's primarily in a geriatric retirement area. So it's highly cataract, glaucoma, macular degeneration, not so much refractive, but the patient load is very well educated. So they're not coming in going, well, what's a cataract? They're actually coming in telling me about the different lenses. So it's been a wonderful place to practice.
Yeah, and pretty much you guys do a ton of lenses, I know. You also do LASIK. Do you do cornea, or do you do anything of that? Do you cornea transplants?
Well, about 1.5 years ago, I brought in a cornea associate, so I've been able to pawn that off and still do some refractive, but primarily I'm just doing cataracts and glaucoma surgery.
Yeah, and we'll get into a little bit more specifics in terms of your techniques and technology and all that sort of stuff. Peter Krall is here from Scripps. He works with my buddy Francis Ma, where the sun always shines in San Diego. So Peter, tell us a little bit about your practice and where you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I've been in San Diego area for about 7 years now. I started out in a kind of a solo private practice, and then moved to Scripps with Francis when that opportunity was available. So I've been with him about 6 months now, and kind of getting settled in. I used the RayOne, the Rayner platform, the 600C, for about 3 or 4 years before the EMV came out, and yeah, it's been a lot of fun, kind of getting in the middle of the lens, and now I get to join you guys, so it's all good.
Tell me, how did you get introduced? Did Francis start sending you all those mucked up corneas that he had in terms of infections, and you had to fix it, or how'd that work?
Yeah, right. As I'm sure you can imagine, I always looked up to Francis, and when I realized he was in the area, and then this opportunity came up, I actually was at a talk with glaucoma specialist Kwong Lin, who's also in our group, and I heard rumors that there might be an opening, and I kind of talked to him, and I already knew Francis. Francis is great. I mean, as you know, he's always willing to help, especially a younger surgeon. So kind of took me under his wing even before the position opened up, and then yeah, so I kind of word of mouth heard about the opening.
And how did you start using the RayOne? Where did you use that in your residency? Did you just kind of pick it up and decide you're going to use it, or was it at the surgery center? How'd you pick it up?
Yeah, so the RayOne, I honestly was looking for a neutral aspheric lens that was preloaded. It was kind of where that started. And there was an independent rep in the area that had just picked up the RayOne. I kind of knew him. I was using the Hoya preloaded for a while before that. And so, that kind of went away. And so he came to me with the RayOne and said, I think you really should try this. It's really easy to use. I really was just looking for something, really easy with a good optic. It could go through a small incision, and I'm honestly really impressed with the preloaded platform. I thought it was very smooth, plunger instead of the screw insertion. But once you get used to that, I loved it. And I just ran with it because I thought my visual outcomes were great. So I kind of stuck with it for, like I said, kind of 3 or 4 years. It was my standard monofocal. And then when the EMV came out, I thought, great, this is just one step improved from that.
Do you have any tips or pearls on the injector system? I know it's a little bit different for somebody who's used to a screw cartridge. I mean, if I'm a new user and I'm just starting to use it, it obviously goes through a 2.2 pretty easy. So most of us are still, I assume, using a 2.4 blade. Do you have any tips how to use it, how to load it, anything?
Yeah, so I definitely still use a 2.4 mainly for my incisions. I think the key is just making sure there's enough Provisc in the chamber. That's the first thing. The lens sometimes won't slide really well if you don't get enough Provisc in there. So, fill it up, or viscoelastic, I should say. And then with the plunger, it's a really, I think it's just a really forgiving lens. It's very soft, and it for someone that's used to a hydrophobic, it might seem like it kind of comes out fast if you're used to kind of the screw. But you really have a lot of control. So, if you push it down to the end, the front haptic comes out, the front haptic comes out. And then the optic, if you kind of slow down at that point and just do a very slow controlled push, you have total control over how fast that optic comes out. You just kind of, slow down your thumb a little bit. And in my experience, I would say probably great majority of the time, probably 80–90% of the time, I can inject the whole thing into the bag without having to manipulate it afterward with a second instrument. I really love that part of it. Just kind of speeds up the case a little bit, and then even if you do have that trailing haptic doesn't come in, you actually can just take the IA and just kind of gently tap on that the optic, and that the haptics are so flexible it'll just kind of flop inside the bag, and you're good to go.
Toby, you got any additional comments about loading the lens, putting the lens in, anything?
Well, I came from, like you said, a screw drive platform where I was going with the injector all the way inside the eye. So it was very different for me to go to a plunger design, also doing wound assist. But the way that this device works is you really don't need to have counter traction. You just approximate the wound, and the way that the haptics come out of the tip of the injector, it actually comes out almost like a V. You've got a little leading edge, so it starts getting into the wound in the center. And so if you just keep adding pressure, it'll go right in, versus some of the other injector systems out there where it seems to push the whole width of the lens all at once. And a lot of times it bounces the injector back off of it. The other thing I've learned is if you get any type of resistance on the plunger, let off and then reapply pressure. So you want to almost like pump it, and that'll make sure that you're not overriding the lens or tearing a haptic. But really the injector system has been very good. I find that when I'm injecting, the lens always wants to dive down into the bag in a controlled fashion, which is great. It's going where I want it to go. It's already starting to open up immediately. So it's almost a planar delivery. And with those nice haptics, I think I mentioned to you earlier that it's almost like having a capsular tension ring, because it's going to go in there and fill the capsule. It's not like some of the other platforms out there that have weak little acrylic haptics that just barely unfold and don't have much tension. These actually go in there and are going to fill the bag. And so I'm able to use this lens on a variety of cases, including, zonular weaknesses or bag defects. So it's a very good platform. And like Peter said, the optics are really good. I actually had my surgery counselors come back and tell me, hey, you may need to find a different basic lens, because we were using this as our go-to lens for just standard monofocals. And they're like, you know, the optics are so good that the patients are telling all their friends, hey, you don't need the fancy multifocals. I do excellent with just the standard lens. So I've been very, very pleased with the optics.
So in terms of, let's go back to one point, because I think that a lot of people that aren't used to this style of lens, do you, how should I say, the V I thought was a pretty good tip, you know, for those that are used to, you know, C haptics or loop haptics, or, you know, say in a SN60WF, in terms of the V, how do you feel like that's going to be in the right position? You obviously bevel down. Can you give us a little bit more tips in terms of somebody that's never used it before?
Well, I like to just take the injector tip and just kind of put it right up and into the wound a little bit. It's not going to go all the way through the wound unless you have a fairly large incision, but I'm able to go through easily a 2-4 and deliver the lens. And so when you start injecting it, it comes through with like the bow of the haptic. So it enters in and you just keep that pressure on, the whole thing will deliver. It dives down into the bag. At that point, it releases it. Peter says he's able to easily deliver it all the way in. I'm not as aggressive with it. So I leave half in the bag, half out. I'll just take my little Connor wand and just dial it right in, and it'll spin right into the bag. Or like he said, if it's aligned right, you can just take your IA and use that to drop in. It's such a flat delivery that this lens is already unfolded by the time you're already trying to place it in the bag. So when it comes to IA removal, it's very easy to just go right behind the lens and take out the viscoelastic from behind it. And it's a self-centering lens. And so, you know, with some of the other platforms, you're having to spend time at the end of the case getting it centered to the rexus. This lens's haptics are going to self-center the lens. It's very seldom that I have to rotate it to find an optimal position or recenter it.
Yeah, and you made a comment before that I really appreciated in terms of you feel comfortable, let's say if you don't have an intact capsule or you don't have issues because of that self-centering, you still feel comfortable if you have a small little tear to the periphery or something, you can put this lens in still, or are you going to go to a sulcus lens and put something in the sulcus?
Well, with this lens, it's a controlled delivery. So this isn't like your silicone lens that's going to snap out. It's going into the eye planarly. So it's very easy to deliver it into the bag with very little force. And so if I do have capsular integrity, so I do probably about 30% femtosecond laser. So, you know, I'd love to tell you that it has less problems, but every now and then I'll get a rexus that'll pop. And so I'm very concerned about what my tension forces are going to be, but I'm able to deliver it right in there. I've even had a lens bag that had gone all the way around. So I had two sides. My hyaloid face was still intact. And so that really tells you how good our phaco systems are becoming, because it's not disrupting. Yeah, right. And I was able to drop that lens one side into one half, one side into the other, be very careful about taking out the viscoelastic, bring in some myocol, and the lens was perfectly stable. And, you know, when I saw the patient back at the month visit, still there, and then checked back on him another 3 months and it was still there. So, I mean, the platform really has a stability issue that you don't see in some of the other lenses.
Now, Peter, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to throw you under the bus to start. What other lenses do you use? Can you kind of tell us what your array and how you pick and choose a lens for a patient these days?
Yeah, you know, obviously there's so many lenses out there. So yeah, I've been using my, you know, just since the EMV came out, I've been using mostly the EMV in the past, we'll say 2 months, you know, starting in July. You know, prior to that, I was using I really like preloaded lenses in general. So I was using the DC Boo, you know, as kind of my standard lens. You know, I look at spherical aberration, you know, so I'm trying, you know, someone who already has a lot of positive spherical aberrations, sometimes I'll put in a you know, neutral aspheric, or I was doing a neutral aspheric for those types of patients. And then, you know, or you know, on the opposite other end, you know, if someone has prior hyperopic LASIK, you know, or sometimes with the you know, obviously with the DC Boo, it has you know, negative spherical aberration. So sometimes do that for if they're really, you know, high myopic ablation. try to balance that out a little bit. But and then as far as premium lenses, mostly use the Alcon torics. I've been dabbling a little bit with the iHance, although I haven't done a ton of those yet. So I wouldn't really say I have a good feel for that lens yet. And then mostly the Panoptics, the trifocal lens, and then a little bit of Vivity. Those are my go-tos.
Primarily what I'm doing these days is, you got to understand my practice is really a lot of post LASIK. So I've done like 80,000 laser vision corrections. So I'm seeing a lot of people that want to come in, they're like, hey man, you made me see good once. Can you do it again? And I said, oh, by the way, we can make you read now. So I really abandoned a typical monofocal when the iHance came out and kind of went straight to that. I still use that toric platform. I'm typically anybody that has a level of maybe 0.75 or less in terms of astigmatism, I'm using the Rayner, and then still using the Panoptics and Synergy for different styles of patients. But we've been really excited about how the lens has been performing. Patients are extremely happy in terms of the big picture. Toby, what are you using these days?
Well, of course, I've got different tiers in my practice. So
of course,
my top tier is going to be my kind of presbyopia correcting, which is usually going to be a Panoptics with Aura. If there's some other reason that I don't feel comfortable using Panoptics, usually it's going to be because it's post LASIK, post RK, maybe it's got a bunch of abnormal astigmatism. Then I'm going to use the light adjustable lens for those patients. Then I'm going to drop down to kind of my mid tier. Now my mid tier is going to be using Aura to be able to choose what lens is going to be best in that eye. And either they'll get a toric or they'll get a Rayner EMV. And so that's kind of, you can't charge extra for a monofocal, but you can charge extra for Aura, which is non-covered by Medicare. So that's how we kind of make that mid-tier package. And so you've got either a Rayner, or if it's too much astigmatism, then I'm going to go into using an Alcon toric. And then my standard lens that's covered by the insurance, I'm going with the Rayner 600C. So that's kind of how we level out our different tiers. Also, femtosecond laser is kind of a la carte. So, if you want to pay extra for it, you can do it, because it takes me just as much time to do the femto as it does to do the cataract surgery.
Yeah, we're lucky. Our femto is right there. So, I'm probably 90% femto. I just started using it a long time ago, and it's really dovetailed feng shui into our practice. Maybe we're one case an hour shorter in terms of time or something, but I think for the most part, the patients seem to like that. They love the laser technology, especially the post-refractive people that I've worked on before. I think that, that's kind of a personal preference in terms of how you want to go. We're not here for that debate. So let's go into the Rayner EMV for a second in terms of the big picture. It unfortunately is not labeled as a monovision lens, but Graham Barrett, who's a great friend of mine, has basically, created this lens that I think has allowed us to create this kind of range of vision. If you look at the defocus curves, I think they're phenomenal. We'll get into those in just a second. The ABI value is 56. To give you an example, Technis is 55, but ABI values are huge in terms of these corneas that you talked about earlier, Peter, in terms of chromatic aberration. And, if we've got a mucked up cornea from some, 20 incision RK or 18 incision RK or 16 incision RK. And I was telling you guys earlier, I had an 81 incision. That's my record. We also got the record for the longest field goal this last weekend. So I think we're working on records these days, but I think for the most part, it's a pretty forgiving lens. I haven't had anybody really a challenge in terms of using it for the optical quality. I did want to bring up kind of the elephant in the room. It's a hydrophilic acrylic. Currently, I would say my YAG, I probably did, 10 more YAG capsulotomies today. So I'm not afraid to do a 10, day capsulotomy. We do a lot of vitreolysis too. So our YAG laser spends a lot of time working. I know that the studies showed about a 1.6% in terms of the YAG laser rate. Toby, you want to disagree or agree with the hydrophilic acrylic, or where are you at in terms of that?
I've been using this platform and this material now for easily over 5 years, and it's a wonderful material. I have had no material problems with it, no calcifications, no inclusions. So I have no problem with that. I would disagree with the YAG rate. In the real world, I would say it's more like 20-25%, which is right in line with its competitors. So I don't see really a difference between it being hydrophilic and hydrophobic. They're both square edge lenses and they do an excellent job of rejecting it. But I'm sure, you know, in the study, there was probably ultra care taken, and that may have shown why it was so good.
Yeah, you know, and I gotta agree with you on one concept there. You know, if you look at my PanOptics, my Synergy, you know, our YAG capsulotomy rate with those diffractive lenses, they're very sensitive to you know, visual dysphotopsies, obscurations, whatever you want to say. So I have a low threshold as long as, you know, I'm sure the patient's happy with the lens. You know, obviously if I've got an exchange of lens, and I've only exchanged one PanOptics because I'm pretty diligent about who we put those style of lenses in. I kind of follow the mantra of Jack Holliday, you know, let's look at the aberrations on the cornea. Let's look at the centration, the pupil numbers, you know, angle alpha or kappa, whatever, chord mu, whatever you want to use. In terms of spherical, I mean, sorry, the standard deviations, you know, on my lenses, I'm always lining up, you know, the Purkinje images at the end of the case to make sure it's well centered, because I agree with you, Toby. I think this is a highly centration lens. It doesn't move a whole lot. I think in the studies it was 0.08. And I think in the rotational studies, it was like 1.83 in terms of degrees, in terms of its rotational stability. We are probably not going to see the Rayner EMV toric for a while, but I know that we're hoping for that. Peter, you want to add anything to that in terms of your YAG rates with the lens, or I know you've had a lot of experience as well.
Yeah, so I mean, I would say anecdotally, I haven't kept track or anything. I felt like, you know, that kind of the classic, you know, the pearls of the lens epithelial cells, you know, coming in behind the lens. I would say that, to me, that did not happen very much at all with the Rayner platform. I would say that rate was lower, but you know, as far as just the back, the capsule just getting kind of gray, hazy, you know, just slightly opacified, maybe a little wrinkly, then, you know, I would say that would happen. But I think anecdotally, I would say less YAGs in my practice than the other you know, other lenses I was using, the DC Boo, for example. But you know, I don't have the data to back that up. But yeah, well, definitely Karl, not more. I can say that for sure.
One of the things you were bringing up was, you know, why this lens is so successful is it's passing 100% of the light to the back of the eye. You're dealing with a PanOptics, it's only 50% for distance, 25 for near, 25 for intermediate. So if they get a 10% PCO filter in the way, that PanOptics could fail very quickly. Where this lens, you know, okay, 10%, you're down to 90% transmission. You're still doing very, very well. So it's a forgiving platform, but it's a forgiving optic.
So let's go there. I'm a new surgeon. I just started using this lens. Okay, what biometry, Peter, are you using these days? I'm kind of a Barrett guy. It's a Barrett lens. We use Aura. I'm like Toby. I use a lot of Aura intraoperatively. It's in the Aura. You know, there's a lot of Rayner in the Aura now. So I'm kind of that guy. If I've got a new lens, like when I went with iHance, I looked at my Technis numbers, and so I was always constantly comparing those Technis numbers. So Peter, tell us, I'm a new guy. You're going to tell me, you know, I'm putting my first cases in, and obviously let's don't talk about myopic LASIK or hyperopic LASIK. Let's talk about, I got a pristine cornea. What am I going to use for biometry, that kind of stuff. We'll get into other stuff in a little bit.
Yeah, so, right. I agree with you. I use Barrett's universal calculator. I have the IOL Master 700. So I'm mainly looking at that. You know, sometimes I'll look at Holiday for comparison, but essentially I've just been going with the Barrett Universal, and I use Aura. Aura is definitely something I use in my practice, but I would say not the majority. And I feel like I've been pretty spot on. And I don't know if it's because, like you said, there's a pretty big landing zone, you know, with the Rayner. I think, you know, this might be a different topic we could talk about, you know, how the autorefractor is kind of interesting with this lens.
Right. Very interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. But so, you know, and so that's kind of been a little bit off. But I would say in general, I've been pretty much dead on. I'm curious with you using the Aura. I mean, do you feel like the Aura will typically tell you to go one way or the other, kind of in general?
I think it's helped weight average a lot of these patients. You know, in other words, if I've got a Barrett, yeah, it's maybe a 20 and it's a 21. you know, in terms of my aura, I put in a 20.5. I've been very successful with that kind of regimen, and it's not that often that happens. I get a lot of agreement in terms of things. You're spot on. A lot of people talk about if you end up with a -0.5 post-operative refraction with this lens, don't think you necessarily miss the mark because of the way the lens is put together. So I think that trying to use an autorefractor to get your post-operative, you know, manifest, don't do that. I wouldn't recommend it. Toby, you got any comments on that?
Well, when I started, they were telling me, oh, you need to aim a little more on the minus side. So I was aiming like -0.5, and I was coming out much more minus. So
Yeah.
I've learned to kind of back that off. In our package with the Rayner, they're all getting aura. And
Right.
so what I've learned is I aim for plano with what aura has in it right now. And we've been optimizing that, but pretty much if I hit the plano on the aura, it's pretty much dead on. So it doesn't matter to me which formula I'm using on my IOL master or my AR scans, because I've got a couple different biometers, because once I go into the operating room, the aura is really going to drive my decision making. When you were talking about the autorefractors, a lot depends on how dilated is the pupil. What part of the lens is it reading? So, you know, if I'm sitting there on post-op day one and they've got a fully blown pupil still and I autorefract them, they're coming out a lot more minus. But if their pupil's smaller, it's much closer to what the true refraction is. And so you can't really trust it. The other part is who's doing your refractions at the 1 month visit to do your optimization of your constants, because you do have a bigger plateau at the top of the mountain. It's not our old days like this, and it was really easy to find the maximum of your defocus curve. Now it's much wider, flatter, and you can be right across that top pretty easily. So you have to have a real good refractions to make sure you're getting the right data going in.
Now, you tell them to fog the patient? What do you tell them? It's old tricks?
I have them fog it, so at least I'm consistent with it. But it's still, you know, you get to the point, well, which is better, 1 or 2? Well, they're about the same. Which is better, 2 or 3? About the same. You know, where it used to be, you know, pretty easy to define it, there is an area where they can slide a little bit. So you have to make sure this isn't your, you know, new hire that's doing the work.
So let me throw you under the bus. I'm gonna do that all night to you guys. So I'm trying to go on equal back and forth here. So Toby, I'm using a Barrett Universal. You know, my A constant, I'm using it straight out of the box because I don't know any better. It's plus 0.15 and minus 0.15. Which lens am I going to choose? So a 21, you know, is one, and a 21.5 is the other. Am I going to go plus 0.15 or minus 0.15?
I'm going more minus, because at least if I'm minus, they're going to get more reading. Yeah. And I can always adjust on the second eye.
And which eye do you do first? You do my dominant eye first? You do my non-dominant eye first?
Oh, this will be a good discussion. We're going to have 3 different answers. So Karl will say it's the dominant eye. Peter will say the non-dominant eye. And I'm going to tell you that I'm going to do the eye that's going to have the biggest wow factor first, because I want to be able to do that second eye the next week.
Okay, and that's what I typically do. When do you do your next eye, Peter? Do you a week apart, a month apart?
I do 2 weeks. I kind of split the difference. Yeah.
So you're plus 0.15, minus 0.15. What are you putting in?
Yeah, I'm minus 0.15. Yeah, I think I've been aiming, honestly, I feel like I've been aiming, you know, minus a quarter, you know, a lot of the times, and I'm still getting 20/20 distance with that. I feel like, again, because of the defocus curves, I mean, it goes the other way too. It's not just not just myopic. I mean, I think I'm still hitting that 20/20 line a lot of the time with my patients. So.
Yeah, I have always been just like Toby. I try to be like Toby as much as I can, but I just tried, I've always been that first minus. And the only thing that came in, that the paper that just came out in August, Journal of Cataract and Refractive Surgery, was from Shellhorn's group. And surprisingly, one of the things that Steve, we've had some private conversations, is that he's saying that first plus is more likely to bring you a 20/16 or better vision in the whatever eye you want to make plano or dominant. So let's say that we're disagreeing to agree or agreeing to disagree on what we do, and it's a little kind of an individual thing. So now, Toby, I've nailed it. My dominant eye was the biggest wow factor. I'm so excited. What do you ask me? Do I see you at the day of surgery the next time? And because I mean, I'm a lot of co-management. I got like 294 optometrists. So
Mhm.
we're going back and forth with that. So
Well, this is a
I'm
great
seeing-
co-management lens because they don't want multifocals. Oh, where do we go? Let's see. There we go. They don't seem to like the multifocals. It's gotten better through the years, but to them it's almost taboo. So this is very much in their range of what they enjoy dealing with. And if this lens can perform and it's a single focus, it works great. But will go for the first eye for plano. And unlike a lot of other surgeons, I'm going to do the second eye as plano because I feel that if the two eyes are getting the same information, then I'm usually gaining about 1.5 lines of vision binocularly. And I don't have the patient going, well, this one's a little bit better on the eye chart than this one. And I go, well, nobody walks down the street like this, but you can never get them to stop doing that. So I'm not one to slide them a little bit. Honestly,
So let's say-
I think there's enough variability in our formulas, in our aura, that you're going to have a little bit of difference between the two anyways. So if I'm aiming a little bit on the minus side, maybe one is a little bit minus and one's plano, or one's -1/4, the other one's -1/2 anyways. So I'd love to tell you that I hit exactly what I aim for every time, but I know there's still some fudge factor in the system.
So tell me, I wear monovision. I had monovision LASIK. I've got an offset of 1.5. Alan Faulkner and I showed some studies that was kind of the sweet spot for an SN60WF or a ZC Boo in terms of, you know, if I really don't know and we're on the second eye and we're doing the non-dominant reading eye the second time. So with this lens, have you had enough experience to say a -1 is going to give me a 2.25 like they say in the literature, or do you feel like you're going to be a -1.25 is going to give me a -2? What's your gut feeling right now?
So what I'm finding here is if this is somebody who's done monovision with contact lenses or another method, I'm going to go for plano for the distance. I'm going to aim for a -1, -1.25 for the near eye, and that gets me the reading. Yes.
Peter, where are you at in that? So first, let's talk about, you know, you've got a plano eye. I assume you're doing which eye first, dominant, non-dominant, or you like him and you do the biggest wow factor?
Yeah, I've kind of been doing the biggest wow factor. If the cataracts are about the same, you know, I will, you know, test for dominance. I'll do the dominant eye first, but you know, sometimes the cataracts obviously so much worse in one eye, and you know, makes people nervous to do their good eye, right? So do that one first. So yeah, I usually do the biggest wow factor. Yeah, I'm aiming for, like I said, about a -1/4 is what I've been doing in the distance eye or the first eye. Honestly, what I was never one to be really aggressive with monovision. I mean, if you were someone that had done it for years with either LASIK or contacts, then I felt really comfortable doing it. But if you didn't have any experience with it, I wasn't going to offset you at all. I have been playing around with it a little bit more with this lens, and I've been feeling more comfortable because it's not so much of an offset. You know, you're only aiming, you know, -1, -1/4. I think as far as tolerance, a lot of people are going to be able to tolerate that. And I just talk to the patient about it after their first eye. Say, you happy with your distance vision? You know, if I'm close to 20/20, you know, 20/20, 20, you know, 20 -1 or 2, then I'll ask them, well, you know, how has it bothered you this past couple of weeks, you know, living with one eye different? And if they'll say no, you know, it hasn't really bothered me at all. It doesn't, you know, I want to get the other one done, but you know, it's not a problem. Then I feel very comfortable talking to them about, you know, I'll show them. I'll get a, you know, I'll get a loose lens and I'll kind of show them what that would look like. It's going to blur your other eye a little bit in the distance. You're going to get more reading. And I've been really happy with that. But yeah, you don't have to go more than about -1/4. I have done that. I pushed a little bit. I think I aimed for a patient that really wanted really good reading. I did like aim for -2, but I don't think you have to go that far. I'm still getting J1 plus with around a -1/4. You know, offset. So I think that's all you need to do for that non-dominant eye.
Yeah, I think most of the people will talk to you in terms of the big picture with this lens. You know, you first maybe 50 cases or something, you know, plan emmetropia, maybe both eyes in a normal cornea, you know, not a lot of problems in terms of the ocular anatomy. Don't start off with your pseudoexfoliation. Don't start off with your microophthalmia. This is not the lens for that, obviously. It's not actually, it's contraindicated. So I think that in terms of the big picture, you know, when you're inching on, most people are saying -0.5, -75 is what a lot of Europeans are feeling comfortable with this. You know, a lot of the people that have had a lot of experience, you know, I'm kind of like, you know, Toby and you, and that I'm going to have that conversation. I'll typically do the dominant eye first, and then I have that conversation. What are you missing? So I always tell the person when they leave, because I do post-op day of exam. So I basically see the patient an hour after surgery, 2 hours after surgery. I started doing that in the ICL era because I didn't want to see a post-op pressure spike. We've got our office set up to where we can do that. And the patients love it because they don't have to come back the next day. So typically my staff or whoever is saying to them, you know, hey, you know, he's going to ask you this when you come back, you know, what do you see with that eye? He's going to ask you, what are you missing? So I think in terms of, you know, I'm always saying, okay, can you read your phone? Are you happy with that? Can you, you know, see, you know, to work on your computer? Are you happy with that? What are you missing? Are you a painter and you can't paint the corners? Are you a plumber? You can't climb under the desk? And, you know, we've got a lot of hunters in North Carolina. So bow season start now. You know, I'm always asking if they can see the pins or, you know, that sort of stuff. And in terms of, you know, one of the questions that came up too, in terms of the, you know, LASIK patients, not in terms of if you have to touch up one of these lenses. I haven't had to touch up one of these lenses yet. I have about a 1.6% enhancement rate in terms of, we just presented that at ASCRS, not this year, but last year. We looked at, you know, I think it was about 2,000 lenses and showed that in those patients with normal eyes is about a 1.6%, and those patients with previous refractive surgery is about 2.3%. So we've gotten pretty good with all the lens calculations and aura intraoperatively. Toby, would you have any troubles, I don't know, doing post-op LASIK on this patient? I don't see anything in my mind.
Well, currently, you know, I've been using this in non-LASIK patients. You know, we found out early on with tetanus when they were doing spherical aberration that that lens was better in certain eyes and not others. So you really kind of didn't want to put it in your hyperopic LASIK patients. So, you know, talking with the engineers, this design seems to have a central add of positive spherical aberration, and that may or may not be the best match for a highly myopic treatment with LASIK. So I'd kind of stay away from that. Like you said, early on, do what you feel comfortable with, start seeing how these patients do later, and you can start expanding your boundaries. One of the things I did notice with this lens when I started putting it in compared to just the standard Rayner monofocal was the day one vision was not quite as sharp or as much of a wow factor. And I'm sitting there going, oh, okay, what's going on? Well, remember, this is playing with a lot of spherical aberration compared to the standard lens. So if that cornea is not perfect, and most corneas are not perfect the day after surgery, you're not getting the full advantage of this lens. And this is the same thing that I saw with Symphony lenses, is that I really didn't like the Symphony lens because I didn't get that wow factor. And with that lens, it was so demanding on the cornea that, yeah, maybe they had good result down the road at 1 month, but they were telling me, well, my friends did better. And so I really didn't like the Symphony. The nice thing with the Rayner is it's not trying to play that many tricks like the Symphony is. But on day one, you know, I'm not surprised if they're 20/30 vision. By the 1 week when I'm doing the second eye, they're in there and they're 20/20, 20/15. They're getting the results. But I want people to understand that this lens is giving away a little bit at the peak distance vision to get more of that expanded defocus curve.
Yeah, and I would throw RK in that same, one of the questions in the chat was, you know, RK, you're gonna have a really oblate cornea. It's a very small optical zone in most of those patients. And so I would say myopic LASIK and RK are probably not the first patients that you want to go out there doing. Peter, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have a reliable way to measure spherical aberration. I think that's probably the way to go. You know, everybody's different, but yeah, I mean, high myopic ablation, really flat corneas. Yeah, probably not going to want to start there.
Yeah, I would imagine.
I think,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think targeting both eyes hematropia. I mean, if you just want to ease into this lens, you don't feel comfortable with monovision. I think honestly, getting a feel for it, I agree with what you said, Toby. I mean, you probably do give up a little bit, like you said, at the peak of that, the sharpness, but I feel like for the majority of patients, they're not going to care because they can see that intermediate and they're going to be happy about that. Go ahead.
I think what we're going to see is a lot of our practices have invested in the technology. We've got the wavefront aberrometry going in. And once we really get the optics known with these type of lenses, these EDOF lenses, we're going to be able to sit there and go, yeah, this patient's going to be the home run. This one's still going to be happy, but this is going to be the patient that it's really going to be the home run for. And a lot of that's going to be, what is that corneal spherical aberration? How much coma is there? What size is the pupil? And I think, right now we're putting these lenses in and we're getting great results, but when we can really pick out those superstars, it's going to be pretty spectacular.
So along those lines, one of the questions is, do you mix and match this lens with other lenses? And then also the other thing that I would ask is, okay, so what is the perfect patient for you, Toby? I'm just starting out. Am I going to do somebody with a diopter of astigmatism? I know you feel very comfortable with laser-made astigmatic refractive incisions, and you're doing this on the femtosecond platform. So for me, at about 0.75 or less is where I'm starting to look at this lens and entertain it. 0.75 and above. It's not that I exclude it, but I'm just trying to find its sweet spot, for the initial patient, so I can get that wow factor with my referring optometrist. Where are you at with the lens?
Well, I have mixed and matched it. So I've had patients where I've used the Rayner EMV in one eye because it didn't have much astigmatism. I'm like you, I think that lens can tolerate probably 0.75 diopters of SIL. If they're combining it with femto, then I don't mind going up to maybe a diopter and a half because I can treat that with pretty reliably with the femto LRIs. But like some of these patients, they've got more in the fellow eye. So I've used eye-enhanced torics over there, and they've blended very well between the two eyes. So I do think that you can. I also have quite a few patients that have been operated on years ago with a standard lens in one eye. And I go, hey, we've got a technology that will match right up. It's going to give you more. And so that works quite well also.
Yeah, we just did a comparable study. I want to say that it had like 300 lenses looking at PanOptix, Synergy, iHance, and this lens included. And we're trying to find the sweet spot in terms of who's the happiest with patient satisfaction. And to go there, I don't know if any of y'all know, I know that we talked about this before, neither one of you guys are using it. Rayner does have a data collection system that is free to any user. You can look at patient satisfaction, you can look at data outcomes. There's a lot of different feng shui stuff that makes your practice better with this lens. I think that's kind of a newbie. You either had to go and use some kind of internet-based refractive analysis or some other platform or software. You had somebody with an Excel spreadsheet doing that for you. I'd ask you guys both, Toby and Peter, before that you hadn't used that yet, but are you thinking about using it now? I mean, Peter, is that something that you can dovetail into your practice easily, or no, now that you know about it?
Yeah, I'd have to take a look at it, a little more detail, but yeah, it sounds great. I mean, I think obviously keeping track of outcomes is the best way to get better. So yeah, I think it's a great tool to use. Yeah.
Now Toby, like you, I've put iHance in an eye because of a toric and this in the other eye, and had very, very good outcomes. We're looking at some of those defocus curves. The patients are extremely happy. And, we have that ability because we do a lot of lens studies, so we can actually look and see where the patients are ending up. But Toby, what about a diffractive lens in this lens, or somebody's had a symphony lens in one eye? Are you going to mix and match that, or no? I'm not, but I'm just saying, where are you at with that?
With Symphony, I wouldn't have a problem doing that with, because I think, frankly, you're going to have less side effects with the Rayner EMV than the Symphony. The performance is going to be pretty similar. Maybe the Symphony has a little bit more near, but I think it'll match up pretty well. When it comes to a diffractive optic, let's say they had an old multifocal in there, I'm usually going to go ahead and match that with probably a PanOptix trifocal, because I think it's going to match very well and fill in the gaps for them. Yeah. So that's kind of how I would do it.
Yeah. So you're ready for this? They're going to be comparing those two, or no? So I have to say that Toby and I were talking about the royal sleep earlier. So I think in terms of, I had this discussion. I have a patient with a Restore 2.5 in one eye. She's gone to a bunch of surgeons who have said, I don't want to take it out because you're 20/20, and it does have an intact posterior capsule, which is a plus going for it. But I'm trying to convince her to let me put a Rayner in the other eye first, and then if she's unhappy with the other, lens, that maybe we could do an IOL exchange at that point. I try to do anything I can to avoid those IOL exchange by hopefully prophylaxing, like I was saying, Jack Holliday's always been kind of my mantra. Listen to him, and then, listen to people like Doug Koch and Warren Hill and all these guys in terms of, look, if you've got an aberrated cornea, don't be a fool. The same thing goes with RK and myopic LASIK in this patient. Don't make those your first patients. I just don't think that's there. Peter, is there another patient you may not use this lens on? So, if I got pseudoexfoliation, am I going to worry if it decenters because the whole bag, I know it fills the bag, but what if the whole bag moves? Are you going to be concerned with it moving and causing a problem in that, or where are you at?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think I am, because of the kind of double haptic design with that central hole in the middle. I mean, I haven't had to do this yet, but I mean, I've done a few lens rescues by kind of looping the haptic with some, with some suture, some Vortex suture. And I feel like that would be a good option for this lens. I mean, you could go right through the hole in the center. I mean, if you have a scarred fibrotic capsular bag, you could, I think, easily rescue it. I'm not too worried about it decentering though. I mean, like Toby said, I mean, it's such a big presence in the bag. I mean, it centers so nicely. I mean, it definitely auto centers, and you really don't have to touch it much. And so, I mean, for that reason, I feel like it's, I mean, I don't know, it almost seems like it's already a capsular tension ring already in the bag, kind of filling up that space. So I'm not too concerned about that.
Yeah,
I've had patients where you've had extreme capsular phimosis, but the lens is still perfectly centered. Meanwhile, I've had other platforms that are hydrophilic acrylic have extreme phimosis, and the whole lens is shifted. So, I know that platform can take the stresses, and if that occurs, you can always enlarge your rexus with the YAG or go in there and remove it. But the other platforms, I've seen them shift the whole lens nasally or temporally, and I'm having to go in there and figure out how I'm going to deal with this.
I simply just don't do glaucoma, so it's easier that way. So I just send that over to my glaucoma specialist and say, hey, you can have this one, it's all you. Now she sends me the other mucked up cornea, so we get even pretty way, some way, somehow. Now, we've got about 13 minutes left. I just want to go through a couple things that are pluses on this lens. I think the high Abbey Valley is huge. I think that Toby and Peter, you both said, the quality of what these people see, and if you look at their MTF on the curves, it's like spectacular. Yes, I'm gonna say it with a Vivity or Panoptics. I do see more 20/25s with that lens, and when we looked at this data set I was talking about, I'm seeing more sub 20/20 patients, even in my infancy with this lens of the Rayner EMV. I'm seeing more patients that see better than 20/20 with this lens. So I think the optics of the lens is phenomenal. The one thing that my sister-in-law still throws me under the bus, she was a classic monovision. I operated on her, and I don't know what you guys do. I operate on family. I don't do like retinal detachment surgery because I suck at it, but I'll do anything that I do, LASIK or whatever. But I think for the most part, she was a classic monovision, wore in her contact lens. She was a -8. She came in, had cataracts, and I said, I can't do LASIK. Took her cataracts out. She climbs mountains and does everything. So she's got, an SN60WF in each eye, because that's what it was available back then. There weren't a lot of multifocal, options I was going to put in her because of her activities, and she wanted that crisp, great vision. But she still has that little twinkle in her eye, and she says that the dogs scare. So, I think that's another one of the issues about this lens, or that we don't get that little twinkle. Are there any other pluses, Peter, that you want to say about this lens that you really like?
Man, I don't know. I think just that, I've just been really impressed. I've actually put this lens, I kind of want to get a feel for it. So I've been putting this lens in, almost everybody. I've had patients with pretty high SIL, definitely over a diopter. I feel like it handles it pretty well. I think what's impressive about, I'll just say one more thing about the monovision. So, if you aim for -1, -1/4, or 1 1/4, in the non-dominant eye, you'll get that J1, J1 plus. What I think is interesting is still in the distance in that eye, you're still getting like 20/50, 20/40, which I think, I mean, that's phenomenal. So there's not this huge difference between the dominant and the non-dominant eye. Just very tolerable. And I was kind of impressed with that. I mean, there's always these anecdotal stories. I had one guy that I offset him by a diopter, and he comes in and he's, I don't know if it's summation or what, but I guess it wouldn't be summation, but I tested each eye individually. And even with his near eye, he still read the 20/20 line. And so, I mean, I don't know if he's interpreting through the blur or what, but I mean, it's pretty impressive, the kind of, that landing zone.
Yeah, I agree. The landing zone is pretty special. And, one of the questions in the chat group is, do we call this an extended depth of focus lens? So realistically speaking, ANSA categories, you can't really say that. That's why the label will say it's not a monovision lens. Does it act in extended depth of focus? Absolutely. There's a great article by Shirodaya that was in Europe's CRST that talks about lens speak. And what I really like to talk to patients, they don't have any idea what an extended depth of focus lens is. I'm just going to increase your range of vision with this lens. So if you're not going to be able to afford, a trifocal lens, we're a lot of times putting this in patients now, because I do a lot of femtosecond laser, and we talk about this will just expand your range of vision. It's going to give you your computer, your cell phone. Yeah, you're going to wear readers when we're done, but we're having that same discussion with the Vivity. If they end up better, we're happy. We're having that same discussion with an iHance. So for me, the iHance gives me about a -0.5 defocus. Vivity gives me about -0.75. I haven't run all the numbers in terms of, I'm sub 50 on these lenses. So I think in terms of, I'd like to get to 50 before I want to tell you, I think we're going to be about a -0.8, -0.85 for my defocus on this lens. I'm not quite where Graham is in a plano bilateral. I don't think they're -1, 1.25 for me. Toby, the question was, how many of these have you put in? I know you put in a ton of the Rayner lens. Are you 50-ish, above 50, or are you below 50?
I'm probably above 50, somewhere around 50, 60 on these lenses. And so it's starting to figure out exactly where it needs to be. Like I said, initially I was hitting a little bit too minus for what I was aiming for. So I kind of backed it off, and that's made it much more successful. If I'm aiming for plano, these patients are usually J2 or better, which surprises me because I don't think they should be that good, but they're able to do it. And that gives me a lot of functionality. I'm not promising patients to be able to read, because I'm telling them usually that, you're not a good candidate for multifocals because of X, Y, and Z. So this is the best technology to give you the most range. So they already have an understanding that there is a limitation that's going on. So I'm under promising, over delivering. One of the questions on the chat forum was, do you expand your Rexus to make this lens work? No, I like about a 5.5 Rexus like I normally would. I can just dunk these lenses in or just easily dial them in. So even though it looks like a big lens going in, it slides into the bag real easily.
Yeah, I'm 5'2" on my femtosecond. Peter, you any different in terms of your capsule size?
No, I mean, I err on the side of going smaller. I don't think you do not need to go big capsule exercise. Like I said, a lot of the time, I put my, I think Toby's a little bit different, but I'll put the injector in as far as it'll go. And I feel like I have a ton of control where that lens goes. And I feel like very confident I can plop it straight down in the bag, including the trailing haptic, just kind of, goes straight down in there. So and that's with a relatively small Rexus, probably about, 5.5 is where I land.
Toby, I didn't give you the opportunity. Any other pluses you want to tell the guys on the and gals on the call? That
well, I think we've hit everything on the platform, the optics, but one of the things that, being an independent owner, operator, ASC owner, the price point is very competitive. And, that makes a difference because you can make it more attractive for your patients and for your practice.
I agree. And I package it like you do. In terms of other options, because we, can't charge more. I know there's some surgery centers that are saying, hey, we're not going to let our surgeons use this lens because it's too expensive. So I think you got to get a little bit creative. One that just came in to all the panelists, we talked about this a little bit earlier. When you refract these patients, they're probably going to be -1/4, -1/2 when you're done. But you got to look and see what their vision is with that. If a plano target and they're coming back -1/4, -1/2. Toby was talking about that. a little bit earlier with the 118.6 as the A constant. I still think you need to look at the Rayner website, talk about putting outcomes in it. You know, start early because you'll finish strong. So I think that you got to find that person that can enter data in, because I've had that happen so many times. You want them to be a little bit OCD. You know, I had one girl that decided that, you know, the minuses didn't matter in LASIK, and so they put all pluses in. I've had about everything you can have. So I think that, you know, in terms of the big picture, I want to say a few things. First, you've got some phenomenal guys on the call here, but there's a lot of people that are using this lens. I think that you know, for us, you know, it's a great option. Start off slow. Use the patients that you feel like are going to be most successful. Yes, all of us, I think, agree that you need to definitely look at the spherical aberration and look at the cornea and make sure you don't have a highly aberrated cornea. And don't start off with your myopic, hyperopic LASIK patients. Myopic patients and RK patients are probably going to not end as happy as you like it. But I think there's a huge landing platform that we've all had that conversation, you know, over and over again, because there's a big stretch at the top. And I think that you'll really like it in terms of that. I think that so far my patients have been extraordinarily happy. My furthest offset now has been about a -1.25. It was like somebody that Toby had mentioned earlier that had been wearing monovision. I still do contact lens trials because I see a lot of young cataracts. So I see a lot of patients with 20/40, 20/50 vision that glare, and they're very happy with this lens, especially if they want that crisp, sharp, kind of 2016 vision that they've had before. Toby, we got about 4 minutes left. Anything else you want to add to the conversation?
No, I think it's just getting a couple of them under your belt and getting comfortable with them. And like I think you said, go for the easy home runs first. You know, when you're dealing with these lenses, these should be your best patients. You're cherry picking them to begin with, and you'll have great results. Then start expanding out from there.
Peter, you got any other comments? We got about 3 minutes left.
Yeah, I thought it might be worth mentioning dysphotopsias. I would say anecdotally, I get a lot less comments, and it's probably because of the features of this lens, like you were talking about, just the extremely, you know, good quality optics. But I feel like I get less complaints, you know, negative, positive dysphotopsias. I was wondering what your guys' experience is with that.
You know, I haven't seen a negative dysphotopsia with this lens. I think it's still possible. You know, I think there's not been a lens that I can think in my mind that I've not had some sort of dysphotopsia with. Some of the chat questions, let me hit real quick. Videos on this implantation. Oh, please go to the website. They got every video you can imagine. Look at all the different lens platforms. They have RayOne, they have RayOne EMV. They have them all that show videos of great surgeons putting this lens in. Pupil size, I think, you know, Toby kind of covered pupil size earlier. If you've got somebody with a large pupil, I think that maybe that could be an issue down the road, but I haven't seen that yet in my practice. The comparison to Vivity for me, I think it's got a little bit better near if you got plano in both eyes by a touch. You know, the company line is about -1. I'm not sure if I'm at -1 yet, and I don't have the data collected to that. Toby or Peter, do you have any data to compare with the Vivity?
No, I think the Vivity is going to have a little bit more near, but then again, it's probably going to have a little bit more chance for having other visual issues,
right?
Just because of its design. So there's a trade-off there.
Peter?
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I feel like, yeah, I agree. I think the Vivity is probably a little bit better near, but the trade-off, I mean, with how much more expensive it is, I don't know. It's an interesting call. I've been actually struggling with that as far as going forward, how much I'm going to use a Vivity in the future now that this lens is available.
Yeah, Vivity's been very forgiving for me. I've got to say that. I put it in lenses, I mean, in patients that have had, you know, epiretinal membranes because they were looking for a reading option. I've put it in, you know, more aberrated corneas like RK patients. The one lady that had, you know, 20 plus RK incisions put a Vivity in. I would not put that in this patient, or just start with the easy ones to begin with. So with the last minute, I want to thank Toby. I want to thank Peter. You guys are awesome. You rock. I know that we're all open to questions. So, you know, we didn't have the opportunity. The last little bit, I want to share my screen one more time real quick. Let's see if I can do this, because I do want to give one plug And that is to our next venture. Oh, wait a second. It's not, there we go. Our next venture is unscripted again. It's the Rayner ESCRS Symposium. It's on Friday, October 8th. Notice that's 15:45, 3:45, but that's Central European time. So if you join that in Florida or in San Diego, you're going to miss it. So you got to back calculate that. That's around 9:45 Eastern Standard Time for Toby and I. It's a little bit earlier for Peter. He may not be awake that early in the morning, 6:45. I don't know. What do you roll out of bed at? But you've got a bunch of great guys. Gerd
I'll
has
tune in to see you.
yeah, Gerd's got a lot of stuff on eye-hands, a lot of experience with the eye-hands. Alan has been using this lens probably as much as anybody. Everybody knows Lucio. Manuel has got a lot of experience. Filomena has great experience. So you're talking about people that have had it longer than we have. So if you kind of want to know what everybody else is using it, been using it for a little bit longer, not much, maybe about 3 months longer than we have, but you got a lot of great people on that call. So please, please, please use the EMV, the Plus1 EMV videos, Rayner.com/Plus1 EMV. Arrange for a RayOne EMV trial. You know, you can submit questions on the website as well. And I want to, end right here because we're 1 minute over. But thanks, guys, for being here, and we're going to sign off.